Welcome to the Smart Business Revolution.
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 You want a revolution?
You say you want a revolution?
Revolution. The revolution.
It's going on right now.
Welcome to The Revolution, the Smart Business Revolution podcast, where we ask today's most successful entrepreneurs to share the tools and strategies they use to build relationships and connections to grow their revenue. Now, your host for The Revolution, John Corcoran.
All right, welcome everyone. John Corcoran here. I'm the host of this show. Go check out the resources and the past episodes because there's lots of great ones, with all kinds of smart CEOs, founders, and entrepreneurs. Check out Netflix, Kinko's, YPO, EO, Activation Blizzard. Lots of great ones for you. I'm also co-founder of Rise 25, where we help to connect B2B business owners with their ideal prospects. And quick shout out to Lisa Vitale of simplydirect.com, who introduced me to today's guest. His name is Bill Flynn. He's a coach, author, speaker. He's collaborated with Alan Mulally. He's pitched Steve Jobs. You can tell both of those stories and been described as a pragmatic Simon Sinek. He's worked for and advised hundreds of companies, including startups across multiple industries. He's been a VP of sales 8 times, twice a CMO, once a GM of a division of a $100 million IT services company, before he pivoted to becoming a business growth coach about 7 years ago now. Prior to that, he had 5 successful outcomes, 2 IPOs, and 7 acquisitions, including a turnaround during the 2008 financial crisis. He also has been listed on the Marshall Goldsmith 100 list of some of the best coaches out there. And he's the author of Further, Faster, The Vital Few Steps That Take the Guesswork Out of Growth. And of course, this episode is brought to you by Rise 25 Media, where we help B2B businesses to get clients, referrals, and strategic partnerships with done-for-you podcasts and content marketing. You can go to our website at rise25media.com or email us at support@rise25media.com if you want to learn about how to start a profitable B2B podcast. And Bill, such a pleasure to have you here today, dialing in, not from the Maldives, which is where you just got back from, but frigid, frozen, cold Massachusetts. I can say that because I grew up partially, not a couple of towns over from you. And I know what those winters are like here in January. But I want to dive in first with a couple of great stories here involving Steve Jobs. We'll pause on that one for a second. And Alan Mulally, who was the head of Ford for many years. Maybe some people know his name, some don't, but kind of an iconic business leader. And you've got a great story about how you ended up connecting with the head of Ford Motor Company, which is insane. Tell us about it.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, John. Appreciate being on, and thanks to Lisa for recommending it. So I've been talking about Alan Mulally. I've known about Alan Mulally for, a decade or longer. He was the head of Boeing Commercial Aircraft during the 90s and actually saved the company in the middle of 9/11. And they came out of 9/11 better than they went in. Then Bill Ford in 2006 asked him to do the same thing at Ford. And then he did that through 2008. So 2 existential economic crises aimed at the industry that he was working in. And he not only turned them around, but turned them around under the worst conditions. And so I've been talking about Alan because I've known about those 2 things, at least the Boeing one, and then of course the Ford one, which is in the last, 8 or 9 years since he left. So Alan and I met because there was a book written about Alan's journey through Ford by Bryce Huffman. It's called American Icon. And as you say, it was an iconic story, so that's sort of fitting. And it talks about how from 2006 to 2014, Alan turned the company around. And I thought it tied in really well to what I do as a business coach. I have the same principles that he has. He obviously did it a slightly different way, but I wrote an article that tied the book to what I do, and Alan read it. Somewhere along the line, Alan read. There are about 10,000 or 12,000 people who have read the article in the last 3 or 4 years, which is kind of cool for me because I'm not really known as a writer. And he reached out to me. He went to my website. He clicked on the About Us and Contact Us, and I got this note from Alan Mulally, who now I've been talking about Alan for years. So my first reaction is, no way is this Alan Mulally. This is someone messing with me.
Yeah, right.
Right. But he said, Bill, I love what you wrote. It was spot on. And I want to meet you.
Wow.
And it was Alan, and it said Alan@mulally.com.
Wow.
Now you could certainly spoof that, but boy, that seemed pretty good.
Right.
And
yeah, that would have been a friend you called up and like, are you screwing with me?
Yeah, kind of. It's sort of what I said. And I did write him back and I said, I'm nonplussed. I'm not really sure what to do here, but I'm going to trust that you are who you say you are. And yes, I would love to meet you. Here's my calendar link and let's get together. He said, no. I would like to talk to you right now. So I gave him my phone number and he called me like 5 minutes later. So I sat on my back porch in the middle of summer, about a year and a half ago, give or take. I chatted with Alan Mulally and such a wonderful man. Here I am talking to Alan Mulally, who's, he's been asked to be in the cabinet of 2 presidents. He gets called all the time to help through COVID. And he's an iconic person.
Yeah.
And I'm chatting with him. And so I'm trying to get off the phone because I'm trying to be polite and like, well, thank you very much. And that's really great. And I know you're really busy. And we chatted for 45 minutes.
Wow.
And at the end of the call, he said, okay, you have my email. Here's my personal cell phone number. Whatever you need, call me.
So what do you do with that? Because,
I said, that's great. I'm not going to ask for anything right now. I need to think about that because this is like a once in a lifetime kind of thing.
Right.
I actually took a month and I thought about all the things that I'm trying to do because I'm really trying to make a bigger difference to people and leaders and help them live better lives and run better companies. And Alan can help me with that because, he's in that world. So I asked for 3 things, and I'll tell you just sort of the one thing, which is I said, hey, you're part of, it seems like you're connected to this Marshall Goldsmith organization, which was called the MG 100. Now it's called 100 Coaches, but it was Marshall Goldsmith, who's basically invented executive coaching about 45 years ago. And he's the #1 executive coach and has been for years. Started this organization because he's in his 70s and he wants to pay it forward. He wants to create a legacy and he wants to help people. Yeah. So he invited initially 15 people to be part of his organization.
And by the way, I should mention Dory Clark, Alyssa Cohn, some really talented people, Erica Dawan are all involved with that organization. It's really cool. And Marshall Goldsmith wanted these 100 coaches to give back, basically. Yeah.
Now there are about 300 of us. And so Michael Bungay Stainier's in there, for those of you who know him.
Yeah. I got his book on my desk right here, actually.
Yeah. Ken Blanchard, the 1 Minute Manager, which almost everyone's read.
Yeah.
He's in the group. It's a really cool. So it's a little awe inspiring when I get on a phone call and I see these faces and I chatted with them. And, I've met Dory and I've met Alyssa and had drinks with them. And it's just kind of cool. It's nice to see them as people. But anyway, so I asked for that. I said, if you think I'd be a good fit, let me know. And 3 weeks later, I was in the group, which I found out later was unusual because there's a vetting process and it takes about a quarter. It takes 3 or 4 months to get in. If you get in, and I guess because Alan said, because I didn't know, Alan and Marshall are really, really good friends. And they started 100 Coaches together. I didn't know that either. So I was like, so here I am. It's great.
Wow.
I'm loving it.
How did you know about their involvement? Or you just read about it before that they'd been involved?
So I knew that Marshall was starting it because I actually applied 4 or 5 years ago. I said, what the heck, I'll apply. That'll be fun. And, I didn't even get, so 20,000 people have applied.
Wow.
There are only 300 of us. So it's harder to get into this group than it is to get into Harvard.
Yeah.
Or even Southwest, which is even harder than Harvard, right?
Getting recommended by Alan Mulally doesn't hurt. That's for sure. What were the 2 other things that you asked him for?
So I said, look, I'm trying to, so what I've been trying to do the last 5 or 6 years is I say, I'm trying to bend the curve. So most businesses go out of business. You have about a 50% chance of making it 5 years, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics and the Small Business Administration. And that's been pretty true for many, many, many years. Most of the Fortune 500 companies are new. They're less than 15 years old. So businesses continue to go out of business. Actually, it's 50% to go 5 years, and it's actually 16% last 25 years. So the longer you're in business, the less likely you are to be in business, which to me is counterintuitive. You think you get smarter, you get better, you'd figure it out.
Right.
That doesn't seem to be it. And we could talk a little bit about, why I think that is, because I definitely have some theories on that. So that was the other thing. And the other thing I said, look, I bet you get asked to do speeches all the time and either you're not interested or they can't pay your fee. And since we're talking about the same thing, I'm not going to tell the same great stories you tell, but I tell some of them within a third party. I said, I'd be happy to do that if you keep me in mind. So the COVID's been a little tough on that one. I haven't had any of those yet. But the Marshall Goldsmith group has certainly helped me with that. I'm part of I'm one of their coaches that they sort of rent out, if you will.
Yeah.
That's sort of my Alan Mulally story.
That's amazing. And that's so hard too, as someone of that stature who you've admired so much from so far, my natural inclination is what can I do for you rather than what can you do for me? But if he's come to you and he's offering, he's saying, oh, I respect what you're doing. And in a sense, you're taking what he's done and helping the world to implement it. So I'm sure he could see that potential in you, but it's got to be hard to think to turn around and then ask him for a favor.
It was a little weird, but I just sucked it up, John. I said, you know what, you may never ever get a chance like this again, and who knows what it's going to lead to? Because I like money and all, but I'm not doing it for the money. I've done 10 startups. I know hundreds, if not thousands, of leaders. Most of them are miserable and suffering and struggling, and I found that it's mostly unnecessary because they're just not. No one ever teaches us how to run a company.
Yeah.
It teaches how to be finance or marketing or whatever. But running a company is completely different than doing those things. And sort of like being a parent. It's like, well, just start running it and do it. But there are ways to do it. There is a way to do it that works well, like 90 some odd % of the time.
Yeah.
And most people don't do it.
And let's dive into some of those topics. And then I want to hold on to the job story. We'll get to that a little bit later.
Right.
But, I've heard those same statistics that you threw out there about businesses that fail, and you've written that we do change wrong, we do vision wrong, we do people wrong, we do teams wrong, we do feedback wrong. There's a lot of different things we're doing wrong. So talk a little bit about some of those major mistakes that you see businesses do over and over again.
Yeah, so let me touch on. I won't do them all because we'll be here forever, but I'll touch on the ones that I think are super important and make the biggest difference. One is vision. We do vision wrong. We think vision is like a statement. It's a bunch of words. And if you read people's vision statements with they're just one sentence, they all sound the same thing, the same way, right? We're going to change the world by, whatever. And it's really generic. That's not a good vision. A vision literally is a painting with words. And you should be able to write it in such a way that when the person who reads it says, oh, I know exactly what it will look like when we get there. And Cameron Herold talks about a vivid vision or a painted picture. That's what it should be. I ask every single one. Lisa did this. All of my leaders do this, or I fire them. If they don't write a vision within the first few months and share it with their team, I say, look, you're not really serious. Because if you want people to follow you, because leadership is much more amorphous than followership. Followership can be scientifically proven, right? What do you need to do to attract followers? One of them is have a compelling vision. I want to do that. I want to help you create that thing. Part of it's charisma and whatever, it's sort of a personality, cult of personality, but even that sort of a vision of, I want to be like that person. It may not be as explicit. So we just don't do that wrong. It needs to be less of a sentence and more of a painting. The other two things that we do really, really badly, which I think is fundamental to it, is our decisions and change. If you want to grow a business, decisions and change are inherent. Yet when I ask people, I say, well, how do you make decisions? What's your framework? They don't have one. Well, we get in a room and we talk about it and then we make a decision. I said, well, do you track how well you did that? Do you have a journal of decisions that you go back to and look at? No. So do you use a particular process every time you do it? No. I said, then how do you know you're making good decisions, right? So I'm about have a framework. I don't really care what the framework is as long as it works. I like one, but it doesn't have to be that one. I actually like two together. But there's tons of decision-making frameworks out there. Pick one or make up your own, but use it consistently. Whether you're moving a mailbox 12 feet across the room or whether you're changing your strategy dramatically, it should be the same way you make a decision. The other thing is change. We do change backwards. We implement first and then sell. And what you should do, and what happens is the people like above say, oh, we must do this, we must change it. And don't ever consult the people where the change is affecting the most, and actually who know more than you do probably about the practicality of the change. And then, so what happens is, according to, I think there was an article years ago from HBR, which says 70% of all change initiatives fail. And I think it's because you do it backwards. You should say, oh, here's the idea, then write a vision about it. Okay, if it changes this way and it works, this is what it would look like. Then make sure that people get that. Then you involve the people who's going to say, okay, the people who are going to actually be involved in it, once you're on board, and we've sort of fleshed that out, could you write up the plan to do the implementation of the change? Because we don't know how to do it. You should do it. Then you start the change. We usually do the change first, and then we're selling and backpedaling and whatever.
Yeah.
It takes forever.
Well, let me press you on that a little bit, because we'll take Ford as an example. 2006, 2008, time of a lot of change in the auto landscape, and even coming up today into 2022, like electrification of the auto industry has been taking place, and Ford kind of was a little bit of a late comer to that. Are you saying that that Ford should go to the workers and say, hey guys, there's major changes happening in the auto industry, Tesla and other electric car makers are coming along, we need to make a change, how should we do it? Would that be the approach that they should take to change?
Well, I'll tell you what Alan did. I don't know exactly everything he did, because we haven't had that depth of a conversation. But when he came in, he just didn't come in and say, I'm the smartest man in the room and I know what to do and here's what we're going to do. He went and talked to dealers. He went out to the plants. He talked to everyone and said, what the hell's going on here, right? How come we're struggling so much? And he found out that, that they weren't selling the cars that people were buying. They were making cars they wanted to make. So if you remember, he jettisoned Volvo, he jettisoned Jaguar. He just said, let's focus on what's really the thing. And to be honest with you, his vision wasn't his own. He said, let's just go back to what Henry Ford said. That's our vision. Democratize the automobile. And I don't know if most people don't know this, but in 2015, the year after he left, Ford, for a very brief moment in time, became the number one car maker in the world again. The last time that happened was when Henry Ford ran the business.
Wow.
75 years earlier. And by the way, he didn't add more brands. He shrunk the business and focused on what they do really well, because he gathered all this information. Anne Mulcahy did the same thing when she turned around Xerox. Lou Gerstner did the same thing when he turned around IBM. Steve Jobs did the same exact thing when he went to Apple. Steve Jobs 2.0 was way better than Steve Jobs 1.0. He was the genius with 1,000 helpers in 1.0, and 2.0 he said, okay, I'm much humbler now. I don't know everything. And what I'm going to do is, he said, I'm going to build a team around me that believes what I believe and I can trust to make the things happen. He still was great at figuring out what was out there because he's super curious, right? And he's a first principles thinker as well. Elon Musk, I think, is one of the best, even though I'm not a big fan of him.
A big first principles thinker, yeah.
He's a first principles thinker, and he's completely revolutionized the rocket industry. He's completely revolutionized the electric car industry and the solar industry all at the same time. Yeah. While risking his entire personal fortune.
It's pretty amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And so those people, they're curious, right? That's what it is. You just got to be curious and realize you don't have the answers. You got to go out there and pull in the information and then figure out how to make it happen. Right. We just don't do that. We just don't do that enough.
Right. And to their credit, Ford was, I think, the only American car maker that didn't go bankrupt after the 2008 or have to be sold. I think Chrysler was sold. A couple of them had trouble. Yeah.
Well, not only that, so if you read the book, the book is really great. The book reads like a mystery novel. Bryce does a really good job. It's a fun book to read, which most business books are boring and dry and difficult. And mine, I hope, isn't one of them, but you never know. And so what he did is, not only did they not go bankrupt, they were going to lose $17 billion the year he took over, and they did. 17 billion with a B.
Wow.
That's a lot of money. Some countries don't have that much money to lose. Yeah. And they lost $17 billion. Not only that, he took a small payment from the government, part of TARP, but he paid it back immediately and never took a dime that GM and Chrysler. Never took a dime and still made it happen.
Another thing you've written about, and this ties into your engineering scientific background, you said there's a meaningful gap between what science knows and business does. For example, a core customer is worth about 16 times more than an ordinary customer. I think that dovetails nicely with what you were saying there about, with Ford and other companies really dialing in on who your core customer is and focusing on that. So talk a little bit about ways in which you get clients to focus on that.
Yeah. So, as you know, we're in Western culture, we're enamored of new and more. We think the new thing's going to solve everything. And if you get more of something, right? If you go to a restaurant, Like if you go and eat in Europe and you go here, the portions are dramatically different, right? And people say, oh, I just got a ton of pasta and that's like supposed to be great. Like, but I got less food and it tasted so much better. It was a much better experience, but we don't have that. That's an interesting culture issue we have. So with the core customer thing, yeah, so that's basically applying the Pareto Principle, right? Which is the 80-20 rule. And if that's true, and it's actually, I've done a survey really not scientific in any way. So I've spoken to probably 300 or 400 CEOs over the last 3 or 4 years. And I would always ask them the same questions when I was doing Vistage or EO or YPO. And I said, how do you talk to your customers? Well, first I said, who talks to their customers? And, maybe half, maybe 3/4, because those groups like EO and YPO, those are the kind of folks who are going to talk to customers more likely. If they're going to join EO and YPO, they have some curiosity, they have some humility to them already. So they're much more likely to do that. But then I say, what do you ask them? And they say, well, I ask them, what do they want? And I say, well, do they tell you? And they says, yes. And I say, well, that's too bad because they don't know what they want. And it's not their job to tell you what to make for them. Their job is to complain and tell you their problems. Your job is to take that information and figure out how to fix it. I'm a huge...
Speaking of Ford, it reminds me of the famous quote from Henry Ford, right? If I'd asked people what they want, they would have said faster horses. Yeah.
Which is apocryphal, by the way, but it's still a great quote. I've done that, research the quotes, and no one can find him actually saying that. Or
that's so often the case, right?
Yeah, right. But it's still like a great quote. I use it all the time.
Yeah, right.
I use it all the time. But that's exactly true. So I'm a big fan of Jobs to be Done, if you're familiar with Jobs to be Done. But for those of you...
I've interviewed a friend here who's big into the Jobs to be Done framework. Yeah.
Okay. So for those who don't know it, it's around 30, 35 years old. It was the origin story is in dispute and has been, but somewhere in the 80s or 90s, some folks basically reverse engineered the product process because either the cars weren't being sold or the IBM PC Junior wasn't selling or whatever it was. And they said, why aren't people buying this? We made it exactly the way they said. And they still didn't buy it. And they found out that people don't buy for the reasons that we think they buy for. And the person that I know most about it is this guy called Bob Mesta, and he's in Michigan. He was a really good friend of Clayton Christensen, who's an HBR professor who passed away in the last few years. And Clayton is probably
kind of credited with it, isn't he? Or
he's credited with the theory
of
the job. He wanted to turn it into a theory, which he did, but it wasn't his. He had a few people in the world who came to him, and he worked with all of them. But Bob would go to Clayton's class and he'd come in as a visiting lecturer and that kind of stuff. And basically the premise is that people don't buy products and services from you. They hire them to do a job that they would like to get done. And that job that they want to do is about making progress or addressing a struggle. And the struggle often isn't what we think it is. So for instance, I can tell a story that I use with my business. So I went in 2005, I started with a company called Live Vault. And Live Vault was an online data backup company, really early in the online data backup world. Did they start? Now it's everywhere, but at the time it was unusual. And I came in as a VP of sales. I replaced another guy, and they said, hey, you need to help us grow and figure this thing out. I said, great, I want to interview our existing customers. So I went to our existing customers and I asked them a bunch of questions, but I asked one really important question, which was, what is the most valuable thing that you got from using our service? I said thing on purpose. And I wanted to know what they got out of it. Not what do you like about us, but what did you get out of it? How do we make your life better? But before I did that, I went to the head of marketing, I went to the CEO, and I went to my boss, who was the head of sales and marketing, and said, why do you think our customers buy from us? And they all told me the same thing. Insurance. They said it's an insurance sell. People are going to pay us a little bit every month just in case something happens, a hurricane or some power surge or something. And I was like, well, that's a really good answer because I've been doing this for a few years and most of the answers were not. Most of the answers I get is, well, because we're awesome. People buy from us because we're the greatest. I'm like, well, no, they don't really care about you. They care about themselves. So I said, great. I said, but I'm still going to do the interviews. And I did 17 interviews. And the only reason I did 17, I should have stopped at 12, but because I didn't believe the consistency of the answers I got. Because I think 10 or 12 of the 17 said the exact same words when I asked them that question, which was set it and forget it. Mm. So we were selling insurance. They were buying time. They were super busy, small to medium business owners. And they said, wait a minute. So I don't have to buy all these tapes, put them in, take them out, label them, make sure that they're safe, whatever. I get to go online, hit a couple of buttons, and I never have to think about it ever again. Yes. How much does that cost? And that's what I told my team. I said, say these words. Whenever you're talking to a prospect, say our best customers like us because we are a set it and forget it model. Don't worry about it. We got your back. And we all knew, I knew as well, that data was exploding. So it almost didn't matter what we charged them because it's a multiplication problem. We charge them per gig. Yeah. The gigs were always going to go up. So about 18 months later, Iron Mountain bought us for 10x revenue. And they've been a partner of ours for years. And it wasn't because of what I did. There was lots of other stuff, but yeah, we proved that it could be done because we kept every month and quarter I was there, we beat the previous month and quarter because my team was on it. They knew what to say. They knew how to do it. It was really cool.
That's great.
So that's what happens. That's an example of what happens. We think we know why people buy from us. And by the way, LiveVault had been in business for 9 years before that. So it wasn't like they didn't have time to figure it out.
By the way, I want to mention, so Jay Haynes was the
yeah, I know Jay.
Guest here. His kids and my kids actually go to school together. Thrive.com, THRV.com for those who want to check him out. We're running a little short on time. I want to leave time for our job story, your Steve Jobs story. I want to touch on one other thing though that you have written about is the importance of leaders firing themselves from the day to day in order to focus more of their time on predicting the future, in your words.
Yes.
Easier said than done, right? Getting leaders to fire themselves from the day to day. So how do you make that happen as a leader of a company that probably ought to fire myself from certain other roles?
Yeah. So it's a really long answer, John, but I'll try to make it short for you. So here's the premise, and they don't always buy into it, but this is the premise, is that your job, once you get through the knothole of a product market fit kind of thing, and you're starting to see some scalability and repeatability in the business, you need to go back and revisit every key critical decision because most of them were just happenstance or circumstance. And you have to make sure that deliberately, are those the right decisions that get us the next layer? And those are some pretty important decisions. What partners should we have? What people should we have? Are they in the right places? I mean, really critical decisions that aren't easy to make. They're difficult to make. One of the reasons we don't do it is because they're hard. And we don't want to fire people or demote them or whatever because we like them. And so that's one of the things that's really hard. And I actually asked that question of Alan Mulally before I got to know him. I had met him 2 or 3 years earlier at a Vistage event, actually, where he was speaking, which blew my mind because I'm like, Alan Mulally speaking to Vistage events. He's a $200,000 a speech guy. But I found out later his daughter was the head of marketing for the local chapter. So I said, can you come into our event and speak? So that was pretty cool.
That's a good in.
Yeah, good in. Very good in. So I'm a neuroscience geek. And what I've learned in neuroscience, I've been studying neuroscience for 20 years. What I've learned is that your mind can't focus on 2 things at the same time. This is the multitasking debate, right? There's no such thing as multitasking. There's context switching, which you can do really fast, which seems like multitasking, but it's not. Your brain can only do one thing at a time. And there's some really cool demonstrations of people driving and doing math and running through cones and I can multitask and they're riding over cones. Well, they can't do the math. I mean, right. You just can't. You can do a few things at the same. You can walk and chew gum, but that's not focus.
Yeah.
If you're not focusing on chewing the gum, you're just chewing the gum, or you're not focusing on the walking. You can also be on the phone and do that. But as long as you're not focusing on, you're focusing on one thing at a time. So if you're doing, then you're not able to think because you can't do and think at the same time. Because that's just, again, that's not the way the brain works. You have to let your brain relax. And I ask this of everybody, so I'm going to ask it of you, John. When you create a new company, when you want to grow a company, it's about creation, it's about insight, it's about innovation. So when you get your best ideas, your best insights, what are you doing? Do you remember generally, what are you doing at that time and when the flash happens to you?
Yeah, it's funny. For me, it's frequently completely out of context. It's not at my desk. It's somewhere else, walking around or riding a bike or on an airplane, going away to some event somewhere else.
Yep. In the shower, on a run, whatever. So your brain is actually quiet. And it's something called the edge effect or it's called weak signal effect, where there's these 2 things pieces of data that you have in your brain that are loosely connected, but it hasn't connected them yet. And you literally rewire your brain. When you have that insight, there's actually wiring going on in your brain. Those two sets of neurons are connecting. That's when you're like, oh, so your job as a leader is to keep collecting information, right? Talk to customers, look at the marketplace, all this, because you don't know when you might need it. Even look at things outside your industry. And then once in a while, you're going to get this insight. And the way to get it is to quiet your brain. So if you have the line of people outside your door, if you're always in meetings, if you're always doing, you'll never give your brain a chance to do that. You have to become bored. And that's when you get your best ideas. So in order to do that, you need to fire yourself from running the company, which is a day-to-day operation. You need to teach everyone how to do the things that you do. You maybe not be able to teach them everything, depends on the size of your company, all that kind of stuff. Because your job is to predict the future. And I think it was Abraham Lincoln, no, this might be another one of those apocryphal things, right? Is that the best way to predict the future is to create it. And so what I do with my clients is I help them to create their own future. So we work through it's like a 3-year planning process, which says, okay, at the end of 3 years, what is it going to look like? Okay, what do we need to do over the next 12 quarters to make that happen? Let's break that down into years. Let's break that down into smaller quarters, et cetera. And we're just going to march slowly through this process. And as it's not something that they say, oh, you're right, Bill, and I need to do that. They realize it as they go. So Lisa is an excellent example, Lisa Vitale. She said to me that, I asked her, I said, so I did a tell me what I'm doing right, tell me what I'm doing wrong, a start, stop, continue kind of thing. And she said, you've allowed me to step back from the day-to-day. I have a really good team. They're doing a great job. And her husband, who was running the company with her, has in effect left the business to do other stuff. And it's because, it's because of me, but it could have been from any coach that she worked with that allowed her to realize that her job is not to run the business anymore. And as it got easier and easier and she had less time thinking about it, and she's now running the EO chapter of New England, I guess, or something, right?
EO Boston. Yeah.
Oh, Boston. Yeah. So it gives you more time to do other stuff.
Yeah.
So I think it dawns on them as they go. I wish I could say I was super convincing and, I had this compelling argument like, oh my God, where have you been, Bill? You've totally changed my life. I don't think that ever happened. But as they see it go and their team starts to get involved and to contribute in ways that they never thought they would, because now they're letting them. It's amazing if you trust someone and let them do their job, how they will do it. If they believe what you believe. If they're not a good teammate, then that's different. But assuming you hire well and train, grow them, it's amazing the things that you'll have them do. So
and I forced my business partner to do a 16-day vacation. Actually, I insisted on 3 weeks. He did 16 days. We compromised this December. And I said the same thing, like the team's going to be great. They're going to be proud of it. And they did. They did a great job. I want to almost about to wrap things up with the last question, the gratitude question that I always ask. But before that, pitching Steve Jobs. How did that happen?
So I was 27 or 28 years old. Steve was at Next Computer, which was the sort of hiatus between Apple I and Apple II. He also did Pixar in there somewhere as well. And I was a speech recognition. I was selling speech recognition, and I went up and down. Early. Yeah, this was 1992, 93. I was going up and down 101, right? Meeting with all of the manufacturers, Acer and Packard Bell and HP and whoever made a thing. Microsoft. I went up to Redmond and did that. And actually, the stuff I sold was Microsoft Sound System. They were using our technology there, and I was working with them as part of the team there. And I went to Next because they were on my list, and I was meeting with a couple of product managers. And I walk in and I have this bulky, horrible looking, it's 1991. I had like a compact lunchbox looking thing where it was really hard to carry in a plane. It was super heavy. Yeah. And I walk in, I set up, and they said, take your time because, Steve might join us. And I'm not thinking at all. And I'm thinking, well, who the hell is Steve? Why are we waiting for? I never talked to Steve. And I still didn't get it until the door opens and there's Steve Jobs. Yeah. And I tried not to be, completely insane. Like, oh my God.
Yeah.
So I was trying to be cool. And he sat down. He's like, all right, go. And we talked for 20, 25 minutes. And he asked me a bunch of questions and it was totally technology thing. And he's like, great, thank you. And off he went. And, I had friends and family that worked for Apple through the 80s. And so I knew of him as a reputation. And And I'm luckily I didn't have enough time to think about it, because I would have been like, oh my God, he's going to like skewer me and whatever.
You do hear stories about that, but it doesn't sound like that was your experience. No,
it was a wonderful conversation. I could not in any way tie what I knew of his reputation to the 20-25 minutes I spent with him. He was gracious and kind and really insightful. He asked some really great questions, which I think some of them I had to say, look, I'm just a sales guy and let me get back to you. So, I got back to him and his team on some of them. But it was a wonderful experience. And I get to tell the story, 20 something years later.
Yeah. Very cool. Did you get the sale?
No, Next never did it. So he left really before Next shipped. They basically folded the company into Apple.
Right.
Remember, the operating system that Next had is what they used for the Mac. So nothing really came of it.
Yeah. Well, cool. What a great story. That's so neat to have that experience. So I want to wrap things up with the question I always ask. So I'm a big fan of gratitude. So if you look around at your peers and contemporaries, others in your industry, however you want to define that, because you've done a lot of different things, who do you respect? Who do you admire? Who's someone that you would want to acknowledge publicly? Yeah.
So a few really old people and some newer folks. Let me do the newer folks first. So gratitude, actually, there's a wonderful man that I met in the last couple of years, or a year and a half. His name is Chester Elton. And he is the gratitude guy. He's all about gratitude. He sends out on LinkedIn every single day what he's grateful for. He's grateful for kids. He's grateful for knowledge. He's grateful for the sun. He just comes up with something he could be grateful for. And he lets people know. And he's very good at calling you and saying how grateful he is. And we're both hockey fans. And he's a New Jersey Devils fan. And I'm a Boston Bruins fan. And they were playing. And actually, I went to the game and I was texting him during the game. And I was sort of ribbing him a little bit. And I'm like, I'm here. And it looks like we're going to win. And he was gracious to, they're really playing well. And it's so good that you're there. And you're there with your daughter. And isn't that wonderful? Isn't it great to spend time? Hey, I couldn't get him at all to jump in and like, come on.
That's no fun.
He wouldn't do it. So he's sort of recently is someone I would definitely say that is part of that. If I go back, this guy, Blair Heavey, who's hired me when I was 26 or 27 years old at Open Market, which was the Netscape of the East. It was a really hot internet commerce company, 1995. So I was in the internet in 1995. So World Wide Web was 1994, and I was working for a company doing e-commerce in 95.
Yeah.
And we worked together for 4 different companies. I learned a ton of stuff from him. He was always loyal and really was great to me. So I'm always grateful to him for everything he did. And there was a couple other people. Rick Haupt, who's another guy I worked with during those years. And I'm still friends with Rick. We still hang out at least once a month along the way. And then there have been a bunch of other company people that I just, like Alan Mulally, who I would never expect to be sort of friendly with. Amy Edmondson, who's the psychological safety woman, she endorsed my book and she read my book, which was really cool. And Bob Mesta, who's the Job to Be Done guy, and he and I are connected as well. And just these wonderful human beings that, I'm sort of in awe of because they've influenced me over the years. And now that friends is probably too strong of a word, but I'm definitely I can send Alan Mulally an email and he will get back to me.
Very cool.
Amy Edmondson's, talked to me and said, I read your book and here's the stuff I love about it. And I said, can I write that down and put it on my website? She's like, absolutely. So it's there's people like that who are just humble and wonderful people who are trying to make a difference. I just love those kind of people.
That's great. And thanks for sharing those, Bill. Where can people go to learn more about you and go check out your book?
Sure. So my website's the best place, which is catalystgrowthadvisors.com. Everything's on there. I actually give away my book for free. I'm more about the message than the money, but you can certainly download it from Amazon or Audible, that kind of stuff. I write a blog post or a newsletter, if you will, twice a month. Really short, 1 to 2 minute read. Always, hopefully, a do-it-yourselfer. It's a help. My book is a do-it-yourself book. It's not a look how smart I am and hire me later. Hopefully, you see that I'm useful. But I don't think I've ever gotten a deal from that. So you can download that for free there. My calendar link's on there. All sorts of stuff is on there. So you can go to catalystgrowthadvisors.com. Catalyst Growth Advisors, and further, faster, the vital few steps that take the guesswork out of growth. Bill, it was a pleasure talking to you. Thanks so much. You too, John. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the Smart Business Revolution podcast with John Corcoran. Find out more at smartbusinessrevolution.com. And while you're there, sign up for our email list and join the revolution. Revolution. And be listening for the next episode of the Smart Business Revolution podcast.